This is Open Studio, a podcast where I invite artists that I know and admire to join me for unfiltered conversations about all things creative. My guest today goes by Who's Sem. He's an incredible producer and musician, and one of my favorite people to talk to about creativity. Go and check out his amazing work. I'll leave a link in the description of this video. Also, if you want early access to new episodes of the podcast, announcements about upcoming guests, and lots of other exclusive behind-the-scenes content, please go and check out my Patreon page. It's a great way to stay connected with everything that I'm working on, and a subscription even in the smallest amount makes a huge difference to me. With that, let's get into it.
The only thing I remember is that you said something like, you need to have a level of delusion in order to be an artist.
Yes, I do remember. That's not the first time I've said that. So that's definitely like something I would have said. Yeah, I think that's very true, man. I don't know if you agree with that.
I do agree with that, yeah, 100%. But I think it requires a level of delusion to be human in the first place and to enjoy life.
Oh, interesting. Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, because you can always rationalize yourself out of anything, whether it's art, whether it's a certain choice you're making with art. And it's the same with life as well. Thinking you cannot do something or feeling that you are restrained in certain ways. Social constructs that you believe that are just completely made up.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with music, and it's the same thing with painting as well. There are no rules. And every rule that is there is completely made up by somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no like objective way to do it right or wrong. It's like, totally up to you to determine that. But there are I think there's a lot of pressure to follow certain rules.
Yeah.
For me, like the idea of like when because I've definitely said this before, maybe not on the podcast, but to other friends of mine, like that idea of needing to be delusional to be like try and pursue creativity more seriously has to do with like confidence as well.
Yeah.
Because like, at least for painting, and I think music is probably similar, at least the way that you're making music. Like, I'm the one who's going to motivate me to wake up every day and keep doing it. And I'm also, like, very acutely aware of how ridiculous it is, like, and impractical. And so, like, in order to have the motivation to wake up every day and choose to do it, despite the knowledge I have of it being crazy and really difficult, I have to be a little bit delusional. Like I have to have a level of confidence in myself that like doesn't match reality necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's the thing. Like, because you have a commission or whatever, and like you are getting paid, but if you don't have a commission and you're making art just out of the motivation for yourself, there is no good reason why you should, or like a rational reason why you should do it. Like, of course, it's like meditative or whatever, but it's not for everybody meditative. Yeah, I remember when I was sometimes making music and I was super like frustrated or stressed, like getting that emotion out of there. But you don't really have an objective reward that you're always going to get.
Yeah.
If you're going to a job, you get paid X amount per hour. You're there for X amount of days or X amount of hours for whatever amount of days per week. And there's very clear result and there's a very clear objective of if you achieve this, you get that. With art, you just have to convince yourself it's going to be worth it, and that's where the delusion comes in, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And also this idea, I really like what you're saying about like there not being any objective, because like you're right, there isn't really like an end game to it. And I think for me, that's why I like it so much and why I've always been like more inclined towards creative things, because I don't like the structure of feeling like, okay, I'm going to live my life and follow these steps and get to this point where I've succeeded and this is kind of the top, or this is the objective. Like, I don't like the level of organization and practicality that's part of that. Like, I like being more part of the chaos of like not knowing what I'm going to do next, or like where I'm going next, or what the point is even. Yeah. Right. And for me, like it's all about like trying to really find a way to like enjoy the process as much as possible in order to make it worthwhile.
I mean, that's the thing. The thing with art is not necessarily the result, but the process of getting there.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it was not the last time, but the time before we met, you said that as soon as something is done, it's basically worthless to you.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about music as well. Like once I finish a song, and especially once it's released, It's basically somebody else's work to me at that point.
Yeah.
It's also why I'm so shit at like promoting myself. I'm like, I don't care about this song. Like,
Yeah,
who is
why
this?
would you care about this? No, I understand that feeling, man.
Yeah.
But that's also this is something we definitely talked about. I don't know when, but like that it's different for you with the music because you do have to do a lot of like editing and going back into something, right? Whereas like with the painting, it's an object that I complete in one sitting over a week or whatever, how many days, and then it's done, and I don't go back to it. Whereas with the music, even if when it's done, you let go of it, that process takes longer, right? So like, I don't know, maybe this is too obvious of a question, but like, where is that point for you when it's like ready to let go of?
Yeah, if only I knew.
Yeah.
It's I mean, it's the same with art in general. Like you make up the objective, you make up the goal yourself. For every individual piece, you have a point where you say, okay, I don't see anything more for this idea. I don't really have any more vision than I have already put into it. Every idea that I've gotten with this core idea, everything that I wanted it to take me, or wherever I wanted it to take me, it's taken me, and I have done everything it asked of me, and you have to let it go. But that kind of that definition of it being done changes, whether it takes you 3 months to finish a song or 2 hours or 3 years. For example, yesterday I made a song in 2 hours, front to back.
And it's done.
Start to finish, it's done. You could put it on Spotify and it would be like hold up against the rest. And some songs take literally 3 years.
Wow.
And in the 2 hour sitting, I can be like, okay, that's it. Like I have nothing more to offer to this.
Yeah. It's a completed idea.
Yeah, exactly. Like there is this core idea or this core creative spark that it stemmed from. And I've taken it somewhere. I've taken it on a path. There's probably a million different paths you can take with that core idea, but I've chosen one and I've executed it. And I don't see a reason to explore another path for this idea. So done.
So it's finished. Can you pinpoint why like that song took you only 2 hours, whereas another one might have taken you 3 years or however long? Like, is it a more complex idea? Is that the difference between the two?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
It's the complexity, the level of depth, the level of meaning that I want to attach to it. The song that I made yesterday is basically meaningless to me, even when making it. It's a fun song, and I listened to it this morning. I was like, okay, this is pretty good. I enjoy it. I would listen to this, but art for me, it's a way of communication, a form of communication. And the song that I made yesterday was for somebody else. And for a song that I make for myself, I'm much more critical and much more, I really want to put my subjective view on music into this. I wanted to kind of represent me or represent part of me in some way or represent something. And then it becomes a much more difficult process, a much more intricate process, because then instead of me being able to define in those 2 hours, like this is the goal, this is what I want to achieve with this, with a song that takes 3 years, every 2 months, I have a new perspective on it. And I listen to it again and I'm like, okay, you know, like this idea means so much to me. I want to really do it justice.
Yeah, sure. Well, the stakes are always a little bit higher if it's something that's personal to you, or it's like coming from an emotional place. Because like if you're putting it out into the world and people don't like it, or there's some reaction like that, you take it more personally when that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, you learn how to live with that as well. Like I've been releasing music for years and years, and at first, I remember like the first song that was doing really, really well. I got like 400 views in a week, and I was like, oh my god! Every 2 hours I was checking it, scrolling, and what was the question? I didn't remember where I wanted to go with this.
I was just saying like the stakes are a little bit higher when you like really care about something.
Oh yeah.
One of the reasons I think is because of the reaction from people. I mean, I think there's other reasons as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But then at a certain point, like you attach so much value to the numbers, whether it's music with views or likes on an Instagram post or whatever, and you have to kind of learn how to separate yourself from that.
I mean, 100%. Because, dude, like, I don't think there's any actual relationship between, like, the number. Like, there's paintings that I've done that I look back on and I'm really proud of, or I really love them. And, like, it got some of the lowest reactions or engagement. And so, like, for me, there's no correlation between my value, well, like, what I find valuable in painting and what other people might find valuable. Oftentimes, it's actually very different. Like, the stuff I like the most is sometimes the stuff people don't like at all.
You think, like, this painting is shit, like, I'm just going to throw it out there or whatever. and so many people love it.
Yes,
and that's the part,
which is so weird.
but that's the part where it's also like it sucks, but it's also like a gift because then you get to realize it doesn't matter really what you think.
Exactly.
It's separate from you.
Yeah.
The art.
And it's like, for me, that's an extra reason to make stuff more for myself than for other people. Because like, if I was trying to cater to what people liked, I don't understand. Like, I don't know what it is about this thing that they like more than that thing. And so like, if I was trying to understand that and only make stuff for other people, I think it would be endlessly frustrating. Versus like, if I make stuff just for myself and that's the goal, and I see things as an experiment, then if you like it or not, it doesn't really matter to me because I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, which was to, like you said, get an idea into the world.
Yeah.
And when it's finished, it's finished.
Do you finish every idea?
Nowadays, yeah, I really try to. When I started painting, I did not at all. Like, I gave up on lots of projects. And I used to, like, when I was much younger, I used to write a lot. Like, I used to write novels and short stories and stuff. And like, that was really hard because I was constantly giving up on things. And I think it had to do with, like, I don't know, I had high expectations. I was a perfectionist. I wanted it to be good. It wasn't good enough. So why would I keep going? Like, that kind of endless thought cycle. Now I'm at a place where, like, even if something isn't, like, even if while I'm painting it, I don't think it's going to turn out as good as I want it to, I'm like, let me at least go to the end and see where it takes me.
Yeah, right.
Like,
right.
because I might find something that I like about it, or like use a technique I haven't used before, or I don't know, maybe sometimes it does come out better than I was expecting. And like, regardless, like, it's really hard for me now to start a new project if I haven't finished the last one.
Right.
So like,
right.
even with paintings, like, I can never have, like, you'll never come into my studio and see like 3 half-finished paintings.
That's my entire hard drive.
It's just half-finished stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking about this with Annie on Friday because we were talking about the permanence of art and or not the permanence of art, but the process of painting is very permanent.
Yeah.
You can't try to scrape it off, but once the line is there, it's basically there, and that's gonna decide where it's gonna take the rest of the painting. And with music, at least in the way that I make it, I just do it fully on the laptop. So every step I take, I can reevaluate, I can refine the step, or I can take a step back and take a different step, or I can take 1,000 steps at once and then choose which couple or like combination of ideas I like the most.
Yeah, sure.
And that could often turns into an endless cycle of just making stuff over and over again. And like, sometimes I'll make like a really short idea that's like 10 seconds long, and then a year later I have this other idea, and like, I remember that sound from 1 year ago that would fit perfectly into this.
Wow.
And then the new idea gets completely transformed, and it forms an entirely different meaning because I attach this past execution of an idea to this new perspective, basically.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's like having a bank of things that you can kind of pull from when you're like, I don't know, you're not sure where, like, what direction to take with something, or maybe like you said, you just remember this sound and you're like, oh, that's what this was for. I just didn't know because I needed to make the rest of the song like 2 years later. Yeah, that's so interesting, man. How do you keep track of all of that? Like, do you think you remember everything that you've made? There must be shit in there if you have, like, I don't know, hundreds of tracks, and like there must be stuff you don't remember, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's really fun to look back. I am relatively organized in like my files, so I'll organize every project by month and then day. So I don't remember what it sounds like, but I remember that around this time last month I made something like that. Then I can check it out.
Okay, I got you.
So I remember it in that way.
So you have like bookmarks in a way, or like you have it
mental
like,
bookmarks. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So like I remember that I made 2 rock songs last year. So if I want some cool drums to just try something out, I can just pull it straight from there, or I can recreate it because I've already done it once.
And I don't know how this would look. Maybe this doesn't make any sense, but like, I think the point that you made is really interesting about like having, because you're working on a computer and you're working like digitally, you're able to go backwards, you can undo, you can do a million different things at once, which is almost like having too many choices sometimes, which can like make the process overwhelming. I wonder if you've ever experimented with like trying to limit your choices on purpose. Like, just like, I don't know how that would look necessarily. But
I've done that, like, for example, with Reasons.
Yeah.
The song with the blue cover, I made most of that song in 2 hours.
Okay.
So for that period of time, I was struggling with, like, committing to a step or committing to something. And too much choice, and I didn't really know where to go. with my style or with my vision. I didn't I didn't really know what it was or what I wanted it to become. So I was just like, fuck it, I'm gonna set a timer for 2 hours, and the song is gonna be made.
So you gave yourself some kind of obstacle almost.
Yeah, because then you cannot think about the steps too much. You have to be finished in 2 hours.
You just have to do it.
Yeah. So that's the same when I do lessons. Like, I can finish a song in 2 hours because I have no choice.
Wow. Yeah. Man, that's so interesting. And that song, you feel like it came out well, like even though you did it in 2 hours? You're proud of the way that it came
the one
out?
from yesterday or the Reasons? Yeah, it was weird because I was like relatively happy with it, but normal happy.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I released it, and it became like one of my biggest songs ever. And there's also the part where your art is separate from yourself. It's not really yours. And especially once you release it, it's absolutely not yours. It's up to the people to decide what it is.
Yeah, really. That's true.
To a degree, of course. You can always hold your own meaning with art, but the balance between your perspective on your art and the audience's perspective on the art are two things that are essential to art making, because it is a form of communication. So it has to communicate at least something, whether it's the thing that you initially intended it to be, or whether someone can create completely different interpretation or meaning from it. So it has to communicate at least to some degree. And then at the same time, you want it to be authentic to you, and you want it to be meaningful from you. You want that integrity, you know, that it has your fingerprint on it, that you're not just copying anybody else. So then you have the challenges to then combine your authentic, expressive self and the rules of the world, so to say, or the rules of communication, which in painting is like composition or colors. Like the colors work well together on a technical level.
Yeah.
And in music, you know, a song has to be a length. It cannot be half an hour. It can be half an hour, but people are not really going to listen to the whole thing, you know?
Yeah, depends, man.
It depends. It depends. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But maybe not in length, but you have to be able to consume it in some way.
Yeah.
And it can take many different forms, and you can be as creative as you want. But if the song is, for example, 10 times as quiet as the song next to it, there's a big chance that it won't really communicate well.
It won't get listened to. Yeah.
Yeah,
man, I think what you're talking about, at least to me, is like kind of this middle ground of like art that is also accessible and like consumable in a way.
Consumable,
because
yeah.
I think there's a spectrum, and like, you know, especially in music, when I think about music, like you could take like pop music, like very, very basic pop music, and then like take like Trout Mask Replica or something like that, and those are on totally different sides of this spectrum. Like one of them is like almost purely commercial, whereas the other one is like almost purely artistic,
like anti-commercial.
Yeah, but in a way that makes it like, I mean, almost impossible to listen to. Right? Have you ever? I don't know if you've ever tried to listen to it.
I don't think so. No.
Okay, it's crazy. I'll play some for you afterwards.
Yeah,
you're gonna lose your mind. Yeah. But anyway, it's like I think that middle ground for me is like, in a lot of ways, my goal is to try and find a way to be in between, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's easier said than done, because
100%.
like, yeah, the rules of what is commercial and what's consumable are not something that I necessarily understand all the time. And like, I also am really like, I want to be as authentic as possible, as often as possible. So for me, I think I tend to go more towards that side of like being like too much in my own mode of expression without thinking about whether or not it's consumable or commercial. And like, I would like to be able to find a way to be a little bit more in the middle, I guess.
Yeah. So you want to go more into the other side of the spectrum, or at least somewhat.
A little bit, yeah. But I also think it's different with painting, because like for me, like I'm just like visualizing this spectrum, and like I see it very clearly with music. But I also think the rules are a little bit different when it comes to painting, because like what is seen as fine art is oftentimes the things that are the most difficult to understand, or the most like I don't know, abstracted in a way.
Yeah.
And so I think like the approach to it is a little bit different than it would be with music.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like you say, what is commercial in art is so much different than what is commercial in music.
Yeah.
Because just to like take a straw man of pop music, and like, don't get me wrong, like I love pop music.
Yeah, I didn't mean to be like judgmental.
No.
I was just
absolutely.
kind of saying on that spectrum. Yeah.
Like I have a very deep appreciation for pop music and what it means to music, but it has the stereotype of it being like cookie cutter or generic, which it often is.
Yeah.
And if you make cookie cutter art you can gain some notoriety, but you're not going to be the biggest in the world.
No, okay, no.
Do you agree with that?
I don't know, man, because I actually think there's a lot of like visual artists that I see who like have a particular style that is trendy and commercial, and they have a lot of success. And I think it's also a question of like what the goal is or how you measure success. Like, are they going to be exhibited in galleries and remembered 100 years from now? No, probably not. But are they going to be able to survive off of their art and make a living doing something that they enjoy? Yeah, very, very likely yes, because they're making something that's commercially viable.
Yeah. Do you hold a lot of weight in legacy?
No.
No,
I try not to, man. I mean, look, I have an ego. We all have egos, right? Like, but it's something I try not to think about or put too much like thought into. I guess as I just said the same thing twice. I'm not the kind of person who feels like it's necessary to like focus my energy on wanting to be remembered. Like, I don't know why I would do that. It's like totally out of my control, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, it's a useless exercise.
It is,
but so many people
it's
are
futile,
completely focused on it.
I know, man. Yeah,
and it's interesting to me.
Yeah. For me, it's more about like I don't know. Like I love more and more, man, in my life. Like I just keep like kind of coming back to this same little circle of ideas, which all relates to one thing, which is that I like making like organic connections with people in my own life, like in person, right? And so that also has to do with like where I want to be remembered or what kind of impact I want to have is with people that I know and people that I love, right?
Yeah, of course.
And that could be my neighbor, that could be my best friend, whatever, my family. But like those are the kind of like legacies, let's say, that are really valuable to me because they carry like the weight of personal intimacy as well, because you know somebody, right? And to me, that's much more valuable than just like, I don't know, being associated, your name is associated with this concept or what you've made into history. Like, I don't know, it seems weird to me, actually.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the personal connection is the most valuable thing.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
That's the only thing.
Yeah, for sure, man.
So you get a lot of your inspiration, or like your core idea is that personal connection, and that's how you get inspired?
I don't know that that's like the source of inspiration for what I make. I think it's more like the way that I'm approaching like let's say distribution, or like where I'm trying to like take my art once it's completed, if that makes sense. And this is also and this is something I've talked about already so many times on this podcast, but it's like, this is why I love doing little shows that like the one you were at Friday, like pop-up stuff, small location, invite your friends, have some other people come who, know you from Instagram, whatever it is, and like have some kind of organic experience that centers around art, but is really about people. Versus like the model of like, just being an Instagram artist and never doing anything in real life and only relying on that. Or the model of like chasing after galleries that have big reputations and have fancy names and all of that. Yeah. Because those both of those things to me aren't actually about the people. And so, that's kind of the way that I think about it. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I don't make my music like that at all.
Yeah. Okay. I would love to hear. Approach. Yeah. How is it different?
I have never performed in front of people. I almost cringe when people play my music in front of me.
Really?
Yeah. Not in the way of like I'm not ashamed of it or embarrassed of it. Like I'm very proud of it, but I don't know. It's a weird dynamic.
Is it too vulnerable?
Not necessarily. I only get that way when it's people that I don't really know that well.
Okay.
So if a good friend of mine plays it and it's like, I really like this, like I'm like, okay, like that's the most valuable opinion I can get.
Yeah,
I don't really care that much about other artists' opinion. Like, of course you care, but I will take your opinion, like somebody that's not a musician, way higher than some guy from the internet. Yeah, it doesn't matter how many followers or whatever.
Sure, of course, because it's that's personal. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Exactly. So it's the way that you connect on the personal level.
So, okay, can I ask you something? Like, when you enjoy music, other people's music, do you have a difference in the way that you enjoy it when you're live versus like just listening to music at home? Is there one that you prefer?
What do you mean?
Like, okay, so let's say you go to a concert or you're at a club or you're at some place and there's a live musician or group of musicians playing music. Do you have a different kind of appreciation or experience in that environment versus like sitting at home or on the tram with your headphones listening to music?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
I would say it's almost completely opposite. I enjoy it for completely opposite reasons. Like when I see somebody live, it doesn't really matter what they are playing.
Okay, it's more about the experience.
It's about the experience. It's about the feeling. It's about the energy that's in the room.
Yeah,
Even if it's not in the room, the energy that the artist is giving off.
Yeah.
And I don't really care about that when I'm at home. Like they could be anybody, and the song could be about anything. But I'm listening to it in my way, completely private. It's my own space, and I can do whatever with it that I want.
Yeah. And it's less about like the atmosphere that it creates. It's almost like
it's completely
more private appreciation.
On the inside.
Yeah. So I guess my question is like, if that like because you've said you never played live, like is that experience? I feel like that experience would be interesting or valuable to have of like creating that atmosphere, right? And like
that's true.
Building that experience so that your music is appreciated in a totally different way by people.
I mean, that's not to say that I don't want to play live, especially with the stuff that I'm making now. It's more of like a journey almost.
Yeah.
And I want it to be like a story that really can connect.
Yeah.
And I would love to play that live.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
And I make it somewhat also with that perspective. I keep that into consideration at all times now when I'm making music. Like, how would this translate into a live setting?
Oh, interesting.
Like, how long should this part take, or how short should this part take, or how can I make this sound way cooler if it would be live, so that it really trembles in your chest and that you feel like this excitement of it almost. Because when you're sitting at home, like, yes, you can create tension and release. But at the end of the day, you're still sitting down, you know,
or lying
down, or walking somewhere. Like, you're not going to suddenly like jump and put your hands up, in the tram.
Very true, yeah.
And when you're at the festival, like last summer, I was at this festival, and it didn't matter what they were playing, what genre, what artist, whether I liked them before, but everything is just so like visceral and real, and then it doesn't really matter what it is, only what it expresses.
No, I'm with you, man. I mean, like, this is a great I have two very good friends here who are both like big metalheads, and I appreciate metal. I don't listen to it at home, but I love going to metal shows with them.
Oh yeah,
because it's so much fun, and it's like it's all about the experience, the atmosphere, the mosh pit, like, the chaos of it all. Like, I love that. But you're right that there's a big difference between like that kind of music in that environment versus me sitting at home and trying to listen to it, where it just I can't appreciate it.
You don't connect with it.
No, exactly. Yeah, I think it's like too aggressive, maybe. Yeah, like
you don't like aggressive music?
I like punk music.
Right.
I love punk music. Like, I listened to punk music like when I was a teenager, like more than any other genre, I would say. But to me, there's something different about punk where it's like, it's angry, but it's also like more like 2 minutes of anger in your face. And I also most of the time can like I like the attitude of punk as well. This kind of like a lot of it's like DIY, like fuck you, whatever. Like that I appreciate. Whereas metal is a lot more technical. And like this is why one of my friends loves it, is because he's a bassist. And so like for him, listening to metal is like, whoa, like listening to the bass lines, the fucking drums, whatever. And for me, I don't have enough of a technical appreciation for music. So I prefer like let's say, and this is very like reductionist, but an aggressive form of music that is a little more raw, straight to the point. Like, I think that's why I appreciate it in that way. Yeah.
Has how you experience, for example, paintings, how has it changed from when you weren't painting to when you now, for example, now that you have the technical abilities, have grown immensely and your perspective has changed? Do you find yourself like looking at paintings in such a different way?
I'm a lot more judgmental.
Yeah, right. I'm the same way.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's a really great question. I always liked like going to museums and appreciating like art and paintings in particular. It's not something that I think I like did a lot of in my life. Like it was mostly, with my parents, let's say on vacation, or like with an ex-girlfriend. We used to go to museums a lot, stuff like that. But it was a little bit more passive. And I think maybe honestly like more based on emotion, let's say. Like before I started painting, I would look at something and like if I felt like some kind of connection to it and I couldn't describe it, I liked that. Right. Versus now where I look at it a lot more technically. Like I'm trying to figure it out basically.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Man, even yesterday I was walking through Old Town and I walked past DSC.
Right.
And they have, I'm not going to remember his name, Bergert, I think. He's a German guy.
Yeah, I was at the opening of that.
You were?
Yeah.
Dude, that massive painting.
It's crazy.
I was with like a group of friends and we were walking to a bar and I literally stopped and crossed the street because it just like commanded all of my attention because like you look at it through the window and it's so enormous. And then I like went up close to it, like, well, through the window, but I was just like, I probably spent like 10 minutes just staring at it because it's so impressive. And what, like, now the art that I like the most is when I look at something, I go, I don't know how they did that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I'm like, how the fuck did you accomplish this on this scale?
I mean, that painting is like 10 meters wide. Like, just to paint the picture, it's like 6 meters tall, 10 meters wide. It's like made out of 3 separate panels.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, you're right. I saw that they were different. Yeah,
and it's completely made of oil painting. So during the opening, they were saying that it was still wet, so you cannot touch it at all. And
that's 6 months at least of work. Man. I cannot imagine how long that would have taken.
And you should really go to that gallery, actually. The other paintings in there are really sick as well.
Yeah.
It's a really intense experience as well, because every painting there are characters, but they are just slightly off human, and they look at you directly in the eye. Like almost every single painting.
I've seen some of his other work online, but I would love to see it in person. It's always a different experience,
But yeah, I know what you mean with like being more judgmental, but mainly because you can kind of analyze it, deconstruct it in your head. I have the same with music. Like sometimes I'll be listening to music, for example, live.
Yeah.
And I'll be like deconstructing every single sound in my head. Like, oh, I would make it like that and that and that. And the same with when I'm listening to music, especially music that is closer to the music that I make. I'm much more judgmental and much more, not necessarily judgmental, but much more in an objective, analytical way, listening to it.
Yeah, analytical is a good word for it. Yeah. Do you think it's ruined it in a way for you?
At some points, yes, because I didn't learn how to balance it. Because I believe with making art, but also experiencing art, it's always the balance between your objective view on it, your subjective view on it, and your critical mind that's trying to break everything down, basically. So at some points, when my technical ability grew, but my emotional ability didn't grow, like when I was much younger, when I was like 15, I became so analytical and technical about it that I couldn't really enjoy music, and then also could not enjoy making music, because at every point I was like, oh, this has been made before, or whatever, like I'm just using the same stuff, or being completely critical in an unnecessary way.
Yeah, sure, man.
And as I've grown as a person, my technical ability also has grown, but even besides that, just as a person, I've grown, and I experience music and art in such a different way now.
Yeah.
I am much more able to balance out the analytical, objective part versus the subjective, emotional, feeling, expressive part. I think that's something that you cannot really get that complete equilibrium at all times.
No.
Sometimes you find it for a moment. Sometimes that moment lasts longer. Sometimes it lasts shorter. But I think there's always some kind of imbalance, which is healthy.
Yeah, it's a pendulum, man. I think like anything, you know, like I'm the kind of person, and I think a lot of other people might relate to this, is just like constantly swinging back and forth between extremes in my life, right? Not like really extremes, but you know, it's that middle ground is very rarely reached, but I think it's a good thing. Yeah. And this is, man, you saying this right now is really like, it's interesting because now I'm reflecting on the way that I approach like my relationship to art that isn't mine, especially paintings that aren't mine. And I realize right now that I have been in this mode of like really not even paying attention to other people's art, because I've been so hyper focused on like, I don't want the influence of this person. I want to make my style that's 100% me. And like, I don't want, and obviously there's subconscious influence from all over, but I don't want to like look at other people's art too much, because then I feel like I'm going to try and appropriate it into my own way.
You don't trust yourself enough to not have it influence you.
Exactly. Yeah. And now in this exact moment, I'm realizing how immature that is. And how like, man, because also it's like making in that way, what I'm really having like a moment of realization here. It's like making in that way is like the same as like when I'm depressed or I'm feeling negative and I get stuck in my own head. Yeah. And it's an endless loop because my brain is it's a closed system. And the way that I help that is by talking to people and broadening that and getting new perspectives. And now I've been painting in a closed loop, because I'm painting just from my own head. Yeah. And I think that's limiting me.
It is, yeah.
Boom. Dude, fuck.
No, absolutely.
Boo, Sem, man, you helped me out. Holy shit.
Dude, I've been struggling with this for years.
Yeah?
Yeah, especially Because if you're too emotional, or not too emotional, it's not a good way of saying it, but maybe too much, like you say, like closed in your own head, wanting to not have outside influence, it's almost a way of fooling yourself, because at the end of the day, every line that you draw is part of like for you, it's a visual vocabulary that you've built up by experiencing different paintings, but also by making different paintings. You know that these shapes of these colors work, for example, or if you want to achieve, I don't know, the shades of those socks, you kind of know where to go with that.
Yeah,
and it's only because you've seen socks or paintings of socks or paintings or experienced that shape in that way.
Yeah.
So you build up this vocabulary, and this is, with music, it's the same way. You hear a rhythm, and you're like, okay, whatever. But maybe 10 years later, you remember that rhythm, and it's like, okay, I can use that rhythm in this part of the song to help achieve what I want to achieve. And you build that kind of musical vocabulary. And it doesn't matter if for now you stop listening to music for a year, you're still going to have all of those biases floating around in your head. And as soon as you close yourself off, you stop adding to your own vocabulary.
That's what it is, man. You stop learning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the moment where you start to stagnate. Maybe you can even grow for a year, but at a certain point, you're going to hit the plateau. And then it has to be really uncomfortable, because then you're like, oh, fuck, I have kind of messed this up for the last year. Or not messed this up, but I have approached it in such a different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
The last year. Yeah.
But man, you know what? That's exactly, like, because over the past few weeks, I would say, like, I've been feeling that in a very big way. That like, and I've kind of like tried to express it and like talk about it on other podcasts like over the past few weeks, but I don't think I've like hit it on the head until now, because it really feels like a plateau.
Yeah.
And it feels like this, and like I keep saying to people like, oh, I just want to like break out of what I've been doing and do something new. And I think it's because I don't feel like I'm growing or learning anymore. I'm just stuck in this one mode of expression.
Doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing. Like doing the same thing can, like for me, over the years, if I've done the same thing every week, it helped me grow massively, a technical way.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. I think there's value in it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but it has its limit.
As if your goal is to grow as an artist and to truly express yourself in an authentic way, at some point you're going to have to be uncomfortable with the fact that maybe you haven't been viewing it or approaching it in the right way. Because I've had the same thing. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no, please, man.
I've had the same kind of feeling of I wanted to create music in a way that's completely authentic to me, so I stopped listening to electronic music. I was just listening to rock or hip hop like for years almost. And I grew as an artist still, and I made completely different music at some point, but I did notice that I was limiting myself to some degree. Even in times where I wasn't listening to music at all, but just making music. Extremely limiting. Yeah. It was like this half of the spark is dead because I cannot get inspired at the A time by other songs, or let those other songs give me a feeling that I couldn't give myself. Yeah. And using that feeling then to make my own art.
Yeah. But what do you think that, like, for you, what is that impulse? Because like what you're describing is exactly what I've been doing as well. Like, why do you have that impulse to like close yourself off and say, I'm just gonna not listen to anything, I just want to make what I want to make?
Yeah, let me think about that. That's a good question.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. I think the reason to close ourselves off is different for everybody in every situation. I think it parallels you as a person, your life, in very many different ways as well. The times I've grown most as an artist are the times that I've grown most as a person. Yeah, I had to grow as a person first in order for my music to be able to grow. And I noticed that, like I said, like those couple of years where I felt I was just stuck, it was not because I was stuck creatively, but I was stuck as a person, and I had to put myself in a completely new experience. I moved to a different city, met completely new people. Yeah. And that's how I kind of broke out of that mold. Yeah, wow, man. And it's the same, like I moved to Prague this year, and I feel exactly the same way. Like you broke out of a mold in a way. Yeah, broke out of my patterns. Your habits. That I established, even thinking patterns or patterns in making music. And I think for you as an artist to have that massive change first has to come for you as a person. Yeah. And you don't have to move to a different city for that, but you have to have those there has to be something. There has to be whether it's a drug trip that hits you just in the wrong way and it completely changes your perspective. Sometimes that's what you need.
Yeah, man. I think you're totally right. But this is also something I've been saying to myself, is that like I need a break. I need to like break out a little bit, you know? Okay. I'm very happy where I am. I'm like feel pretty content in my life, but I also like spend 90% of my time in this studio.
Yeah.
And like then if I'm not, I'm just like spending time with friends here, which is great, and I love the city, but like I haven't had the chance to like go out and go to a new place, go explore something, go trap whatever in a very long time. And like I think I'm feeling the impulse to do that, because I think it would be good for me even on a short-term basis to, like you're saying, like reset my brain in order to then reset the way that I'm approaching my like creativity as well.
And it's I mean that's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yeah. How do you, because you said you don't have a goal, but how do you see, for example, your style change in the future?
In the future?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. There's definitely like ways of painting that I see in other people. Like, I don't know if I can think of an example. Okay, Ernst Ludwig Kirchner. He's like a painter from 1920s and 30s, I want to say. I might have butchered that, but I love the way that he paints because it's very loose and expressive. And this is something I've always wanted, but I haven't really been able to accomplish. When I started painting, I could a little bit because I was like practicing it more. And so like there's certain styles or ways of painting that I see in other people that I think, oh, that would be great someday to get to the point where I'm able to do that.
Yeah.
But I also think about it in terms of like furthering my own mode of expression, let's say, and like getting to a point where I'm like, I don't think it'll ever happen, and I hope it doesn't happen. And maybe this is what we talked about the other night, but I don't ever want to get to the point where I make something and I say that is exactly what I imagined in my head.
Yeah, right.
Like, because then the chase is over, basically, right?
And with exactly as you imagined it to be, do you mean when you started that painting specifically, or you as a painter? Like finally you have achieved the painting you were always meant to make?
I would say a painting, like one piece. Painting. Yeah. So because it's also like in my mind, I don't even know if that would be possible for me, because like the way that I approach painting is very like I allow the process to guide me towards the result as much as I can. So like obviously I will start with a sketch. I have some kind of concept most of the time, but like I don't really even imagine the final product in my head. I just work and let myself get to something, right?
Just savor the process as much as you can.
Exactly, yeah. And that, for me, is the most fun way to paint, because it's very, like, exploratory.
Exactly, yeah. I most of the time, I'm the opposite way.
Really?
Yeah.
You have a very concrete idea of what you want.
I work the best when I have exactly what I want, because now I'm at the level where I can make exactly what I envision.
Yeah. So you have the technical proficiency to like...
Yeah, exactly. So my technical skills caught up with the kind of creative part. And then, that sucks, because then you have those infinite possibilities ahead of you.
Yeah.
And then you are, like, for a long time, I had no idea what to make, but I could make almost anything that I did want to do. So then I had to choose out of these million different options of what am I going to choose to do, and why do I do it? Like, do I want it to represent me? Do I want to have, I don't know, valuable addition to the genre or the style, or do I want to be a part of this? And
that's again like a lot of choice, right? It's
too much choice.
Yeah, which can be very, very crippling in a way. So what's guiding you right now? Like which of those options, or if there's another one that's like the reason that you're making something now?
So the reason, or why I am making what I'm making, is really to, of course, express myself. But that's always been like, if I make music for myself, I do it because it's fun and it's a part of me that I want to express. Yeah, it's a very hard question. I would say something along the lines of wanting to make something that represents an idea or a certain moment in time for me, or a perspective on XYZ for that moment in time for me. Like when I say that I know exactly what I'm working towards, it's only on a sound level. Got it. So what it means to me emotionally completely changes. That's what I will say. So what it means to me emotionally or conceptually is almost always completely different than what I start out with.
Do you see it as almost like a discovery of that emotion? Because like for me, like the creative process, a lot of the times, like that impulse, that spark is something I don't understand.
Yeah.
I just feel it. And then I follow it. And through the process of making something, I arrive at like what I think it was, right? It's
you
like,
thought it, or what it could have been.
Sure. Yeah, potentially. But it's like, oh, I was sad because of this. Or like, oh, this is what I was feeling or trying to say. And I didn't know that this, like, I just wonder if that's the same for you.
That's exactly the same for me.
Yeah.
Like some songs I'll just start and I'll be working sometimes for even months. And then at some point I realized it was about this all this time.
Yeah.
And it could have turned into something else. It meant something else for me. But because of the route I took and where I took this idea, it now means this to me. And then the emotional attachment is bigger than the sound attachment.
Yeah.
Because I could make a different song or something similar that gives me the same emotion, but it's that journey of discovery through the process of making it that is truly making me realize what it was supposed to be in the first place.
Yeah. Isn't that such a cool experience to go through as well? Like I don't know. I love doing that.
That's
actually
the magical part for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because even though you, for example, don't know what it's going to be like in the end result, you do know what that, you don't know what the initial idea is, but you trust that the process will take you somewhere where that original idea could have, well, what it could have meant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's a million, like when I see, or when I talk about the creative spark, I see this dot in the center with a million lines poking outside of it, and every line is a path you can take that idea to. And then once you get to the end of that line, another dot gets put down, and then another million different lines get created.
Wow, yeah. Like
so
an
it's
endless web.
Yeah, an endless web, or this little root system where you start with the tree and just go deeper and deeper and deeper. And every choice you make brings you further. Sometimes it brings you back up, but you keep following it down, and then at some point, it's not an objective definition, but at some point you feel, okay, this is what it means to me. Or this is what it was. Not what it was supposed to be, but this is one of the options where this idea could have taken me, and I'm happy with it.
And this is like the end point of that path or that journey towards.
And then you realize, okay, this is finished. So that's for me, because when I don't have any more to add, first of all, it's on a technical level, but then the emotional has to also feel fulfilled. If I don't feel that it's finished, it is not finished, and I'll save it on my hard drive and I'll revisit it in a year. Man,
that's such an intangible thing, right? Like trying to measure, like now I'm thinking more about writing as well. Like whenever I don't do a lot of writing anymore, but when I did, like I agree with you that there's this like, you have to get to a point where you feel like it's finished, but that's like so abstract and immeasurable, right? That like it's like sometimes like my rational brain will second guess my feelings, right?
Yeah.
Where like I have enough like, let's say like cognitive intelligence or ability to like post-rationalize things and reflect on things to the point where like even if I felt it, I will second guess myself or say, oh no, maybe you didn't actually, blah, blah, blah.
Do you struggle with that, overthinking?
Yeah, definitely. In phases of my life. Man, I'm either usually in one of two phases. I'm either losing my mind and overthinking everything, or I'm not thinking at all and just living my life often acting very impulsively. Like I feel like I really and now it's a lot more like balanced. Like the swings are less extreme, but like it definitely is still like that's kind of how I operate. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the balance that we were talking about. Like you're either on one end of the spectrum or the other.
Yeah.
But ultimately what you're looking for is somewhere in the middle, somewhere in that gray area.
Of course, man.
Or not what you're looking for, but yeah, I don't know how to describe that.
Yeah, but I also don't think it's like lots of things we're talking about, honestly. Like I don't know that the goal for me is to achieve that permanently because like that momentum
I don't think you
swinging.
Can.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, like, I know some people say Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle, do you know that guy?
Eckhart Tolle, yeah.
Man, I really don't like.
No.
I'm gonna put him on blast right now. No, I won't go into it. But I don't know that much about him. I haven't read any of his books, but like I've heard his kind of story that he tells of like being very like depressed, down and out in his life, like really had nothing, blah blah blah, and then one night like just had some kind of epiphany and like achieved some sense of like eternal bliss that he lived in for 2 years, and he was just like wandering around the world and like living in bliss. I don't believe that for a second. But some people claim that they've been able to reach it.
I mean, I could believe that, but I don't think that's a state you want to be in for the rest of your life, is it?
No.
Because that's on one end of the extremes.
Yeah, exactly, man. Yeah, and I think I mean, this is not a new idea, but like I think you need both sides in order to appreciate the good stuff, right? It's
you need the chaos and you need the logic.
Yeah, you need both, man. Yeah. It can be kind of frustrating sometimes, though. Like, especially from like a creative perspective, like it's like in those moments where I'm overthinking things, like I will really I'll stop believing in myself too, because for me, like a lot of that impulse and the reason that I do stuff is because I'm just following my gut and my instincts and I'm feeling something. So when I'm stuck in that overthinking mindset, the engine that drives my creativity, which is my gut in a lot of ways, that's what I start questioning.
Yeah.
And I also lose that delusional confidence,
and that's
right?
what you need. Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
what you need, where the moment I start going, oh fuck, should I do this?
Like, does it
then
work?
It's like, it's like, oh, is this the right approach for this painting? And then that turns into like, oh, should I be painting this at all? And then it's like, should I be painting at all? Like, you know, and then
exactly.
you're just like, this like cave of sorrow and just, like self-pity and bullshit, right? But it's
pity party, yeah. It's overthinking for me, like I have a difficult relationship with it.
Okay, yeah.
Because like you say, like sometimes you get stuck in these overthinking phases and lose all hope, so to say. But I think overthinking definitely has overthinking as a term is an extreme oversimplification of an extremely multifaceted and deep thought process that's going on in your brain.
Absolutely, yeah.
And to just write it off as overthinking, I think you lose a lot of the value that it can have, or that kind of thought process can have on you. Because when I, for example, let a song ferment on my hard drive.
I love that word.
I use that word all the time.
It's beautiful. Man.
It's literally like the song will be even finished, and I'll just let it ferment. And after a year, I'll come back to it, and with this new perspective. And overthinking in that way is not necessarily, oh, I'm not sure about this, but allow me to look at this from a different perspective. And sometimes that perspective is toxic and like makes you believe that you shouldn't be doing it, or that what you've been doing is a waste of time. That's one perspective, but the other perspectives could be completely valid, of like, oh, this idea is good, but I could not necessarily put more emotion into this, but make it more meaningful and more authentic if I added this other perspective to this.
Yeah,
and that's what we talked about with the music. You can be much more iterative. You can go back. I can change half the song, transpose it, make it into a different key, make you feel something completely different.
Yeah.
Only because I wanted to. And the only way you can want it to is to give credibility to some of those other perspectives that you might have when you're overthinking.
Yeah. Well, to me, I would say that's actually just thinking. Maybe not overthinking.
Exactly.
Right?
Overthinking is maybe thinking about that wrong perspective all the time.
Exactly.
And giving it too much weight.
Yes.
But thinking, I think, is very healthy.
Yeah. Wow, man. I think we just solved like all of the world's problems. Thinking
Podcast
is healthy.
over.
But dude, I totally hear what you're saying. Yeah, it's a valuable part of the process. Yeah. I think especially with what you do, because like you're right, it's very iterative, and you have the opportunity to come back to something, and like bringing a new perspective to it will help it achieve like you'll get it to a place that's closer to what you want it to be, because you're able to come at it from multiple sides over a longer period of time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. The song that took 3 years, I would not be satisfied with it if I released it 1 year ago or 2 years ago, or now, even 6 months ago. But now I feel like it's truly at a point, okay, this is what it was meant to be all along.
Wow, man.
I followed those paths, and at some point I made a wrong turn. I just let it sit, let myself take some time, work on other stuff, live my life, and come back to it and change it up. I changed like 70% of the song.
Yeah.
And now it's exactly where I want it to be.
Wow, man. And you couldn't have known that when you started it. That's
no,
the thing.
I thought that like a year ago I thought it was finished. And I was looking to release it, but then like, for some reason I didn't. It was not intentional, but I didn't. And then I came back to it, I think it was last summer or the winter. And a different season, different perspective, and I completely changed it. Even like on a whim. I think I woke up at like 6 a.m. and I just went straight to my desk, deleted half the song, and by 9 that morning I had something different.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And that's what I love as well about working on the laptop, because I can do that anytime, any place.
Yeah. Well, yeah, man. I mean, we were kind of talking about that before as well. Like, I love being in, like, living in my studio space because I can just wake up and come downstairs and paint.
Yeah.
It's like a similar thing in a way, right? It's like having the accessibility to your creative tools so that you don't have to, like, force yourself or go out of your way in order to be able to make something.
You don't have the time to second guess. I mean, you can make the time for it, but as you grow as an artist, you realize sometimes you shouldn't think about it. You should just put it down.
Yeah.
Think about it later.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
First make it.
Yeah.
Even spend, like, set a timer on your phone. 2 hours. I'm going to make it. If it sounds bad, so what? You made something.
Yeah.
You can delete it, but at least you spend time making art.
Yeah.
And if it sounds good, that's the best thing ever.
Even better. Yeah.
Because you've captured that initial feelings in a somewhat of a successful way, and then you can start to refine it. And you don't really need that initial creative spark to even have it as a perspective in order to finish the rest of it.
Yeah, man. Yeah. A little bit of a tangent, but the spark for you, like, is there one theme or one kind of thing that you return to? So, like, let me see if I can phrase this in a better way. When you're making things, do you find that there's one particular like instinct, spark, one theme, one idea that you are returning to over and over again to try and express through different songs that you're making? Or is it always different?
I would say it usually ends up at a similar point. Like, it usually ends up at that kind of through line.
Yeah.
But initially it comes from all over the place.
Okay. But
I don't think about it.
Okay.
It just naturally ends up at a certain place. I think that's a large part of how I found my sound as an artist as well, is to make a lot of stuff over the years and then look back on it and discover what the similarities. Because you just make stuff and you grab stuff from your mental vocabulary, like we talked about earlier. Like, you have these ideas from songs that maybe you listened to once or twice 3 years ago, and suddenly you are able to put that in. But then the more you use certain words, for example, it's the same with talking. You know a lot of words, but you don't use all of them. The only ones you use are the ones that you like and that you're comfortable with, and that kind of you feel to some degree at least are able to express what you feel and what you think. And it's the same with music as well. Those certain patterns, certain rhythms, certain feelings, they naturally come to you because you feel it's representative of you.
Okay, so you're talking about, like, the kind of like the technical or the
feeling.
Yeah.
The feeling it gives me when I listen to a lot of my music. It gives me almost not necessarily the same feeling,
but similar,
like melancholic, emotional, throughout those terms, it just explores all kinds of different corners of that. Yeah,
absolutely. The reason I ask is because, like, I feel like sometimes I'm just making the same painting over and over again.
I've had that a lot. Yeah.
But it's like, it's not this, like, they look totally different.
They are totally different.
Yeah, but like the feeling of it is like the same. And so I wondered if you also related to that. And like now I'm starting to ask myself a little bit more like, oh, what is that? Like, what is that feeling? Where does it come from? You know, like,
it's interesting to explore that.
Yeah,
for sure. I think it has a lot of value. I don't think you should give 100% of your choices or like base 100% of your choices based on that. But I think it's immensely valuable to explore that to some degree. Try to understand why this all feels similar. Because through exploring that, you discover your own voice, your own perspective, and you start to unravel your choices and unravel your perspective more and more.
And this is where the thinking comes in for me, right? Because it's a lot harder for me to do the thinking while I'm acting on the paintings, but like I can do the thinking after the fact and like look back on the, you know, I did 50 something paintings last year, and I can look at those and go, where's the theme? Where's the thread here? Like, what was I trying to express, and what was I getting at? And now, what's changed now? What's different now? What's the same now? You know, I don't know. I think, I need to do more of that, I think.
With music, it's different because every week I listen to a lot of, not all my old songs, but what I'm working with in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
I listen to it at least once per week.
Really?
So I listen to it more than I'm working on it. So I allow myself to think. I'll go for a walk in the park somewhere, or even at night I cannot sleep. I'll put my earbuds in and I'll listen and just think. What does it make me feel? Where do I want to take this? Not have to do it, but just put it in my brain, because then tomorrow I can wake up and be like, okay, so I wanted to do this and this, let's try it out. Then I can just follow the process without having to think too much about the emotions.
Yeah.
Kind of separate the emotional part.
Yeah. See it more objectively, almost, like, or not objectively, but like remove that
more analytical
subjectivity. Yeah.
Even analyzing the subjective. So not necessarily on a technical level, but how does this make me feel? And usually it makes me feel something different after I've made it.
Yeah.
So while I'm making it, it can be something. Then I listen to it 2 weeks later in some kind of mood, and I can completely relate to it in a different way.
Does it change if you're listening to it in different like circumstances? Like if you're on the tram versus like at home versus, I don't know, on speakers in your headphones?
Not really. My environment around me doesn't really affect that. Maybe in the way that I'm listening to, if I would listen to a band playing it live, completely different.
Be different, yeah.
But if anything, if I'm in a tram, I get distracted and I miss half the song. I start thinking about something else. You're like, well, which tram am I gonna take? Where I'm gonna go or whatever. But or I get a text and I stop listening to the song. It becomes passive.
Yeah.
And that's also why I listen to it so much, because as I'm making it, I'm not necessarily as I'm making it, but sometimes when you listen to it or look at a painting, it's passive. You're not really actively listening or seeing. And when I listen to my songs, I don't know, once, twice a week, when I'm on a walk or somewhere, even if I'm going to go to the grocery store and get some breakfast in the very morning, I barely woke up, I can just listen to it.
Yeah, man, I feel like I can't do that in the same way.
Yeah, it's a completely different medium.
Yeah, because like I think that's it's important to be able to remove that subjectivity a little bit, right? And like lift yourself out of the passive experience of making something, right? Or consuming it while you're making it can start to feel very passive.
How does it work with painting? How do you do that?
It's kind of hard, man, because like I think in order for me to get there, I would have to like give it space. And like for me, because I like to work, like I try and do one painting a week, and like I'm working like every single day, all day on the same painting. And because I also have like so many projects lined up most of the time, like I can't just like start a painting and then give myself a week off, hide it, and come back to it. At least not right now with the way that I'm working, because like then I'm like, oh, I'm losing time. I don't want to start another painting until that one's finished. Like it's just impossible for me. So the way that I try and do it is like I just take photos of my paintings like while they're in progress. And then, like in the evening, I'll go and sit by the river and I'll look at it.
The different like work in progress pictures, like the different snapshots of the process.
Yes, and weirdly enough, I have a different perspective on it when I'm looking at a picture on the phone versus when I'm looking at it in real life. And weirdly, it helps me notice like things that I don't like. Yeah. Or like it helps me zoom out a little bit, because like when I'm painting, I'm standing up in front of the painting most of the time, and so I get lost in a lot of the details. But when I take a photo and I go and look at it, like it kind of brings the whole composition into my viewpoint at the same time. So I'm noticing more like big picture things that I want to change, or like this isn't working yet, or this needs to be different, or oh no, I need to balance this with another color here, whatever.
That's then exactly the same process that I have then. Yeah. With listening to the music, because then you get, like you say, like you get to zoom out. Yeah. And you get to look at the bigger picture. Yeah. I think that's a perfect way of putting it. That's how I make most of the big choices for my songs. It's not while I'm working on it, but while I'm not working on it. That's when I make the biggest choice. I don't even have to listen to it. I'll go on the weekend to the park with my girlfriend, and during the walking, I'm like, I should do this with this.
Yeah, it just hits you.
Like as soon as I'm home, I need to do this with it. Yeah, that's the right choice. Yeah, and it just comes like that.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think it's all we're circling back to the same kind of idea here, but that's the balance, right? Of having the thinking and the feeling. And when you're working on the song, it's the feeling. And then when you're, listening to it later or thinking about it, that's you trying to meet somewhere in the middle to be able to find out where to go with it.
I mean, even the other way, where you're working on it and you're thinking too much, you cannot really feel the big picture. You don't really know where to take it because you are so close up. Like, for example, I'll work on the same sound for like half an hour, just over and over again, the same note. Yeah. Adding a little bit of noise, changing the texture a little bit, maybe changing the instrument, different melody. And you're so zoomed in on the fact, or so zoomed in on that specific detail, that you lose the kind of the feeling and the bigger perspective. And that's why, the thinking brings that back.
Yeah.
Allowing yourself to take a step back, putting yourself in a different environment, not having or not being able to work on it, and listening to it or looking at it, and then coming up with new ideas.
Giving yourself space. That's true, man. Yeah. Super important.
100%.
Yeah. Man, do you want to talk a little about your EP and what you're making now?
Sure.
I listened to it again today, and I think it's fucking fantastic.
Thanks, dude. I appreciate that, actually, a lot.
It's I think I maybe said this to you the other night, but it's just like so like sonically diverse. Like it's all over the place. And like the first track, when it starts playing, sorry, I've got something in my throat.
Have some water.
Huh?
Have some water.
I've been drinking water, but it's not helping. It sounded like Brian Eno, man. Like there was some like ambient influence there, something like that. And then you take it in a totally different direction. And I love the kind of journey of it. But to be fair, I haven't listened to that much of your music. Like I've listened to the stuff on Spotify that's like the most played songs and stuff. But this to me sounds really different. And I don't know if that's an accurate assessment.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So like why? What is this? Where is it coming from? You know?
Yeah, why? That's the big question.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. That's exactly what I wanted it to communicate. This kind of journey and trying to... At some point, I was really kind of obsessed almost with trying to encapsulate all my influences into my music. And then you're sitting in front of your screen and you're trying to, in 3 minutes, express everything that you've ever heard. And it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to reasonably include all of my influences into my music to some degree, and I also don't want to force the idea into something that it's not. I don't want to make that kind of song into, for example, a metal song, because it's just not what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, sure.
I want to take another route with it, but I still want to get some influences, for example, from rock music, the drum rhythms, or for example, you say Brian Eno, perfect example, the ambient sounds.
Yeah, man.
I put that all throughout my music, because sometimes I listen to a song and I'm like, it's just 3 different sounds. Like, can you not do a little bit more? Like, try it just a little bit. Like, put yourself in the space. Like, add some rain, add some vinyl crackle. Like
sure.
that's the kind of stuff that I love. The details,
like texture. Yeah.
Yeah. And really making it like a 3D space, as if you're in a room where you have the things in the background, the things in the front, the things on the side. You're really, I'm moving the microphone too much, but really using all of the space that is available to you.
Yeah.
Because in music, the space doesn't exist until you use it.
You have to make the space.
You have to make the space. If all the instruments are in the middle, you don't know that there's all this stereo width to play with.
Wow.
And as soon as you use it, it exists. And if you use it in the left ear, you can use it in the right ear.
Yeah. That's I've never heard it like thought about in that way, but it makes sense, man.
Yeah. I mean, the only way I've heard someone talk about this is in mixing music. So placing different sounds of a drum as if you would stand in front of it.
Yeah.
So the snare on the right side, because the band is facing you.
Yeah.
So the snare on the right side, cymbals on the left, kick somewhat to the left or the right. But I think it's in pure composition like that as well. Putting certain sounds in the front, in the back, utilizing that space, and really creating almost this kind of mini pocket universe in a song. It's weird. This is the way my brain works, but it's like I see it. It's visual in my head. Like this concept of building space in a song, I can imagine it visually, right? And that's because I don't know. For you, it's probably more. You're imagining the space sonically. Excuse me. Give me 1 second. Yeah, of course.
Okay, I think we're good. Like you're imagining the space sonically as opposed to visually.
How do you see it visually?
I literally imagine like an orb.
Right.
And I imagine like different parts of the composition, like existing in different parts of the orb, but then like coming towards the center where it all fuses together, let's say.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, I don't think in that way, but that's really cool. No, that sounds really cool. Yeah. I see it sonically, yeah.
You do, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Or I hear it. I experience it sonically. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, my goal with this EP was then to really try to encapsulate different styles of music, different artists, different ideas. Because in the past, I would decide like, okay, the song is going to be this genre or this style. Like I'm going to combine these two songs and make something new out of it, for example. And you get very quickly caught up in, oh, does this sound fit into this genre? Or do other songs in this genre do this as well?
Yeah, man.
And that I was stuck in those kind of boxes for so long. Like when I started making music on the laptop, I was, I think, 11 or 12.
Okay.
And I had a very clear idea of like, oh, I want to be Skrillex or something like that. Like I had these artists that were like, okay, I want to be like them or make music like them. And then as my technical ability grew, I could be more creative. I could make different kinds of music. And then it grew even more to the point where I was analyzing and being super objective about music, being way too critical, sticking myself into a box and not being able to escape, and then being super not satisfied with my art and thinking like, why does it feel like this? Now I know that it's because I put myself into these boxes, these artificial limits that I either myself made up or society made them up, and I believe them.
Some outside pressure maybe as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I've tried to let that go more and more. And it's a journey, of course, but I really kind of want to blur the lines between different styles of music and where my influences come from. And and this EP is only the first step of that, because I'm still listening to it. I'm like, okay, it sounds maybe a little bit more of the same. But that's from my perspective then. But I have just decided that this is just part of my journey, and I'm not gonna overthink it too much in that way. I'm not gonna want it to be also that, and also being able to include this. Like, I'm just gonna let it be what it is. Try to put all my influences in there, let it represent me, who I am, and what I think music, not necessarily what it should sound like, but it's almost like chasing the ideal song.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't want to make that, like, just like you don't want to make the best painting you've ever made.
No, but the chase is worthwhile.
The chase, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the process of, like, life is not about getting to the point where you die. It's about enjoying the process of dying slowly but surely.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same with art as well. You don't want to actually reach the goal, but it's necessary for you to go through the process.
And you have to have the goal in mind, even if you know you're never going to achieve it.
It's somewhat of a goal. Yeah. Because then otherwise you don't move forward.
Yeah, it can be loose, but exactly. You just need something to set your eyes towards.
Like, you know what, this is everything that I like about music. And everything that I like about music, I want to encapsulate in my music. Yeah. Whether it's in one song, an EP, or an album, or a series of EPs, or a series of albums.
Or a career.
Exactly.
I think the scale of it can be very, varied. One of my friends who's also a musician puts a really, there's a similar concept where he talks about, like, wanting to make music that he wants to hear that doesn't exist in the world yet.
Exactly. That's it.
He was on the podcast as well, my friend Connor, very, very good friend of mine. And I think a lot of the time gets frustrated by listening to music because he's like, I like this part of this song, but it's not like I would have done it like this.
Exactly.
Right? Or I like the idea of this, but that's not the way to approach it. And he feels like there's nothing that he can listen to, or maybe not nothing, but very few things he listens to where it's like, this is what my vision of music is.
That's exactly,
that's exactly cool that you think about it like that as well.
It's pretty much 100% the same.
I'll
listen to a song and be like, I would have done it like that. I wouldn't have made this choice.
Sure, man.
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. Like, you want to execute your vision of music, whether you want it. Because I don't want all music to sound like that.
No, of course
I would
not.
lose, you cannot, it cannot be like that. But I want to try my best to try to encapsulate that.
Yeah, you want to add a piece to the puzzle, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And it's your piece of
this
it.
Is my valuable addition to, or not, that doesn't have to be valuable. This is my addition to music.
I think you're right. It doesn't have to be valuable.
No, fuck it.
If you do it, then you've added something.
Art is inherently valuable. It's useless to measure the value of it.
You think it's inherently valuable?
It's inherently valuable. Yeah, absolutely. It's necessary.
Okay, I would love to hear your perspective.
Valuable, not in a monetary sense.
No, I know. No. That's not what I meant. Yeah.
I mean, partly, of course, but I think it's 100%.
Why is it necessary?
It's the core of human expression. It's words and it's art, and words are used to communicate, but words are also art. Books,
Language,
lyrics, poems.
Yeah.
Every form of expression, in some sense, is art. Because it expresses who you are as an individual, and that individuality is the only thing we have. Not the only thing we have. That sounds really... that sounds awful.
It's like some Darth Vader shit.
No, but that individuality is meant to be celebrated, I think. Because we are all so similar as human beings, but also unique in our own way.
Yeah, we are.
And that uniqueness is so amazing. I think that's the most valuable thing about life. It's just like you say, where your goal with art is to draw from these personal connections.
Yeah, yeah.
But those personal connections are the art, the initial creative spark, whether it's a personal connection to somebody or to yourself, discovering who you are more when you take a walk in the forest by yourself and realize, like, God, this is what it's all about, you know?
Yeah.
Communicating that into some form of art, whatever we have decided what art is. Massively valuable. 100%.
It goes beyond, for me, also, like, beyond the individuality. I don't disagree with you. I wasn't trying to attack you. I just like, sometimes I like
challenging.
Yeah, a little bit, you know, because like I think we can all have different perspectives about it, even if we agree with each other. For me, I agree. Like, I think the individuality is absolutely important, like self-expression. But there's also an element, like, the reason to me art is necessary because there's an element of almost like participating in a collective activity that validates what makes us human, which is that we have the capacity to imagine and reflect and be self-aware and exist beyond our like biological functions.
Yeah.
And like making art is purposefully choosing to spend your resources, time, and energy on something that doesn't feed you, doesn't clothe you, doesn't house you, but still like is an essential, necessary part of what defines humans as a species, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so for me, like making art is like participating in that, I don't know, you can call it like a fabric or some kind of like collective
consciousness.
Exactly, right? And like saying your, however big or small it is, like adding your voice to the choir of being like, we are valuable.
Yeah.
We are finite and tiny, but we are valuable, right? And like for me, like when I look at art that like speaks to me, it gives me hope. Right? It like inspires me. It makes me feel like things are going to be okay. That like all of the little bullshit problems I have in my life that I'm whining about don't really matter. Yeah. You know, like it does all of those things for me. So I totally agree that it's necessary.
And you making art validates other people's perspective in that way as well.
Yeah, 100%, man. Yeah. Every new person who decides to like pick up a paintbrush or, you know, pick up a guitar, whatever it is, start sculpting is like it's like a conversation that they're having. They're adding to that same kind of like resonant voice that we all we all agree with.
And I think that's because, for example, coming back to the example of pop music, it is stereotypically like generic. People don't like that it's cookie cutter, and then they say, well, art is about expressing your own perspective. Why don't you just do that? But they don't realize that pop music, for example, is oftentimes an expression of what a lot of people are thinking.
Absolutely.
Because people are listening to it. You know?
Well, why do you think so many people listen to it? Because they relate to it.
Most people in this world are listening to this song.
100%.
Like, you can decide whatever you want, but it is validating somebody's feelings or helping them in some kind of way. And you cannot measure that. You cannot be like, oh, but this song like impacts somebody else or validates somebody else's perspective even more. No. There's a useless exercise to measure that. So if it's valuable, it is valuable, and there's no...
Even if it's just valuable to one person, it's valuable. Yes, I totally agree with you.
That's why all these bullshit statistics like likes, views, that ultimately don't matter, because if there's just one person that changes their life, even in the tiniest way, where they listen to your song once a week, you know, or look at your painting and really enjoy it and remember it.
That's true, man.
That's it.
It is the only way I'll push back against that is that like that I agree with that like ideologically. But there's also like the realistic side of things, right? Which is that like if you are like me, for example, and you're trying to make a living out of making art as well, then you do also have like practical considerations, which means that like I kind of need more than one person to like look at my paintings and look at them every day.
For you to be able to sustain.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't need to be thousands or whatever. Like that's not the point. But like I don't need that number to be high because I want the validation, right? I want to grow it to a point where it makes it more sustainable for me, basically.
Only to be able to sustain you making more of
the thing that I love, which is for me at the end of the day. It's
whether it's painting or writing or whatever.
Yeah, anything, man. Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Yeah,
really Yeah, wow. I'm gonna go to sleep tonight and I'm gonna be like, wow.
Dude, me too, man. I feel like there's a couple things we talked about where, like, you genuinely changed my perspective on some shit. So I really appreciate that.
I appreciate that. Dude.
Yeah,
it's the same to you as well.
Yeah,
like I love, especially finding all these commonalities between music and painting. It's basically the same shit at the end of the day.
It is, man. This
exactly
is what's so interesting to me, right? Is like there's so many things that you can describe when you're the experience of making music where I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that's like.
Exactly the
and
same.
it's just like it's like dialects of the same language in a way, right? It's fucking beautiful, man. And I also love, like learning from each other, and like it's nice because it goes back to what we were saying of like adding new perspectives to what you're making. And like it's nice to speak to someone who's a musician and add your perspective to my practice of what I'm doing.
Exactly.
Because that's a perspective I may have never arrived at because I'm not making things in the same way as you. But it's still a valuable thing to have, right?
Yeah.
Which is super cool.
Like every time I go to one of your guys' shows, and it's usually on a Friday.
Yeah,
and then the whole weekend I'm like
is,
so inspired.
Hell yeah!
I'm like, wow, this just makes me like need to do music.
That's awesome, man. That is an amazing compliment. Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's awesome.
I went there twice, but
still. I mean, dude, that's if more people can feel like that as well, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same with that. For example, the DSC gallery, the giant painting. I was thinking about that one for days. And
I've been thinking about it all day today, man. Yeah.
And it's the same with my music. I love all of the details that he's able to use this giant canvas to express everything that he wants to express on that canvas.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I'm going to go back and look at it again. I'm going to go look at the whole exhibition, actually. Sem, let's wrap it up, man.
Yeah.
We'll do another one of these for sure.
Very
soon. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, dude.
All right,
it was
man.
a pleasure.